Welcome to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast. I'm Aaron Robbins with Intrinsic First. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Be sure to stick around to the end for some debatably funny jokes that will hopefully leave you with a smile. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. We're here to support you, and we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. Ready to dive into the world of leadership? Let's get started.
I wouldn't know.
I feel like we're back. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Welcome back, everyone.
Nice to see your back. Nice to see your front, too.
Welcome, everyone, to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast.
No alcohol needed.
We're a little punchy this
I can't
morning.
believe I got that one out.
A little punchy this morning. That's all right.
Okay, fine.
I'm
Okay,
Aaron
fine.
Robbins. This
And
is
I'm Drea Zagarmi.
Dr. Drea Zagarmi. Do you know just Drea?
Doctor.
Hey,
You know,
doctor.
it's going to kill me to have to call him doctor.
I know what he
Well,
doctor in training.
You got plenty of time.
And Jimmy Karam.
And Mr. Jimmy Karam.
He's
It's pronounced Karam because I
yes.
care.
No.
It worked out well.
No, we call him Karam because he's off the walls.
I carried him off the walls, right? That used to be a game. You remember that game, the Karam? It used to be the little rings, black and red rings, and you had like a little stick to hit them off.
Oh, no.
It's called. We'll have to show a picture while we're telling us.
I wish
Anyways.
I knew about those.
I'm sure I could find one on Amazon. I'll bring it. We'll put it on the table next time.
All right. Well, today we can't decide yet what we're going to talk about. So we thought we'd get on camera and we would talk about what we're going to talk about and try to decide.
A little friendly debate, maybe, or maybe just some clarification.
Or
on
unfriendly.
Unfriendly, sure.
No, we'll keep it friendly, I think.
Well, I'm the one that's sort of holding off on what we're talking about because I believe it would be interesting to summarize some of the things that we've talked about up to this point on other podcasts as a mechanism for framing and moving on. And if you remember, I think we talked a little bit about the definition of leadership in the beginning, and then we moved from there to the idea of different contexts. And the context is the fundamental for me, the fundamental changes that we'd like people to understand and grasp. That because leadership is a set of behaviors, it's the context that has to be taken into consideration to understand the kind of skills that we might either develop if you're a learning manager, or that you might want to examine and use more frequently. For example, if you're talking to somebody in a one-to-one meeting doing a performance review, that's a one-to-one context. And it's a little simpler, so to speak, than if you're talking about group leadership, when you're talking about somebody helping a group perform more,
Or a team.
or a team. Yes, because the difference between group and team is that fundamental distinction that's not made well enough to then adjust behavior. Now, for me, listening is exhibited differently in a one-to-one context than it is in a team context.
And that's what you would call an example of a micro skill, too.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So a micro skill such as gatekeeping, which is a word or a behavior that you want to use in a team. So if we were talking and I say, Jim, I haven't heard you take a position on this discussion today. Would you like to say something? Because it's helpful for you to have a place in the conversation that represents a point of view that will help us get better or perform better. So gatekeeping is a listening behavior in which you're giving access to the airtime that's happening among a group. And the larger the group is, the more someone has to be sensitive to the airtime that people are getting or not getting in a given problem-solving session.
But so that's just an example of like where a microscale changes depending on the context.
That's it.
Correct.
That's exactly right. And it's fundamentally important that people do gatekeeping. A leader, an informal or a designated leader, do a certain amount of gatekeeping.
Okay, so that's an example of a micro skill. That's kind of where our conversation was kind of going to. Like, we were thinking about potentially going into the realm of like motivation, right? And just maybe have an introduction to motivation. And that's where the conversation started to evolve as to whether or not motivation was a micro skill or not.
Well, the awareness of motivational outlooks that are fundamental that people can take either in a group context or in a one-to-one context is an underlying skill or understanding that every leader should understand. What is motivation? What are those fundamental motivational outlooks? Why are they important?
Right.
That would be a skill or skills that we would want to rehearse or understand in our podcast.
Right. And that's just it though. So a clear distinction that we believe motivation is a skill, which many people don't perceive it that way, but after we're done, you will. But the question is, I found more intriguing is whether or not motivation is a micro skill or a macro skill.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's talk about that for a minute. You want to say something? Don't let him say it.
We'll let him in. We'll do some gatekeeping here. Come on in.
May I enter?
Please.
Oh, good. I've always seen motivation as two things. The theory behind it is like a foundational concept that applies through everything you do. And then the skill of motivation is the skill of shifting your motivation. So I don't know that, your outlook. Motivational outlook, yeah. Correct. Yes. I don't know that I would say that motivation is a micro skill. I think that shifting your motivational outlook is a micro skill, but the concept of motivation, just like the concept of trust, where you could say the same thing about trust. Trust as a theory or as a concept or construct is a foundational construct.
Let's call it a field or a set of ideas connected.
Set of ideas.
Okay.
There's a skill associated with trust, which is building trust or establishing trust. And that would be potentially the micro skill. I don't know that that's the same with listening. Listening doesn't necessarily have this fundamental set of ideas underlying it, like motivation or trust. It's just a skill.
Well, it's interesting, and we should talk about this offline at some point,
or online.
Yeah, but I mean, because it's going to do what you're really saying is, I hear there's a theory to the idea of motivation. There doesn't seem to be a theory for the idea of listening.
Yeah, I think that might be.
Is that a good way to say it? So there's theories about motivation. There's also theories about the use of leader power, for example, is another example. And that, by the way, is one, the word power has often been used rather pejoratively because people look at, you have to use power to get people to, so there is a body of theory or body of ideas that has to do with motivation. In fact, there's 4 major motivational theories. And there's a lot of difference between political power, or I don't mean electorate in a democracy as much as I mean organizational politics is one side of power. And then you have leader power and the idea of people using different types of power.
But power has a full theory of inherent power, expertise power. There's
That's
I think
exactly
5
right.
to 7, depending on which theory you're going off of, maybe 9.
So we're on the idea of wavelengths of the field itself is a required set of understandings that you want to see leaders encounter, which is different than sort of changing or helping someone else change their motivational outlook. I got it?
Okay.
Okay. So in the our understanding of our underlying understanding of leadership, we're using contextual leadership. That, for me, is a meta, or what you would call, not a micro skill, but a meta model, so to speak, a model for the idea of understanding different aspects.
Well, they call it contingency theory, so it's a theory, no?
Well, we can call the one that we're talking about as theory, leadership theory, sure. Yeah, but leadership theory could be divided into contingency theories, such as situational leadership as an example, or transformational leadership as another one. Those are all words that designate certain bodies of knowledge that, if I was helping people grow, it would be them familiarizing them with various bodies of knowledge, of which is motivational theory is one.
So I don't know if this matters. I'm not trying to be get stuck in technicalities, but in org behavior class, right, when we went through the basics of leadership theory, transformational is a theory. You have full spectrum theory, which is essentially transactional and transformational kind of together.
Yes.
And then we had, there's a bunch, but contingency theory was the theory, and then situational leadership along with, there were two others that were similar. Contingency theories were like subsets of that theory.
That's correct.
Okay, just making sure. So situational leadership is not a theory, it's a framework within a theory? Or does it not matter? Because I don't want to go down a road we don't need to.
Yeah, we don't. We really don't. But the point of it is which is more overarching, a meta theory, or whether it's situational, transformational, situational leadership. Those are what I would call models about leadership that you'd want people to at least be aware of.
Right, but transactional theory doesn't have multiple
models. Well, it does.
It.
It does. It has five. It has four. The four I's.
Yeah.
The four. With the beginning of the letter I.
But is there another version of it? I've not heard
of transformation. Sure.
Yeah,
well,
it's the four I's. Right?
You could. you could. It's not as well known or not well examined. Interestingly enough, a lot of leadership theory is not empirically based. Now, some of the models that we run up against are empirical. Transformational leadership was really based off of McGregor Burns' thoughts on it, but it got tremendously expanded because of Bernard Bass's work with it. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that you if you're a student of leadership might want to touch on. But let's be really clear. We're trying to make a distinction between what is macro versus what is micro. And so for me, motivational outlooks are macro. They are things that have been...
I agree with that.
The theory of that.
And because there's four different theories of motivation. And not
more than that even, I think.
Yeah, but if we say empirically, historically examined what went through, and it's interesting because certain models get examined empirically and certain don't, and as a result of it, what I'd like us to represent is an understanding of what is empirically shown to be the most effective behaviors used in context in a particular point in time. Okay. So now, coming back to what is micro and micro versus micro, for me, listening is not as widely examined, and you've flagged that, as let's say motivation. And so.
But feedback will be once I get done with it.
Yes, and you're going to do a really good job.
I don't know.
Well, maybe. But the point is that in these podcasts, what we're trying to do is provide a sort of systematic way of looking at leadership And in this case, we're using context as its mechanism for understanding, or for us dividing into the myriad of things that has been examined over the last, it's been 100 years now, or so, of good, solid empirical stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I'm turned on to motivation in the sense that where do we fit motivation in leadership context? Like
Well, so and that's what we're talking about is like what's the chicken and the egg? Where do we go next? Do we start with these underlying motivation theory, trust theory, or do we go into the micro skills, which also then look different in different contexts, or do we start with the context and then go back to the theory?
I would sort of advance the idea that the context is important to do because not all behaviors are appropriate at certain circumstances that you might face as a leader. It's really important to see that the context may change the skill, the micro skill that's necessary to be effective.
Right. So I could totally see that with like listening, we talked about how that's different in different contexts. Something I don't think we've examined because we've been really on this motivation train is how does like how is shifting as a micro skill, shifting your motivational outlook. How does that change in different contexts? That wasn't a button.
I'll be glad.
That wasn't a button. That was actually choo-choo.
I don't have a trained sound effect.
Give a button over there.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but the question is how, which I do agree that shifting your motivation outlook is a micro skill, but I don't think we've examined how does that change in different contexts.
Oh, I think it's fabulous that you're raising that because the issues of changing motivation. Why is it a micro skill? Why is it a micro skill? I think there are different contexts that shape your approach to different skills used. Okay. Now that's what we've talked about gatekeeping versus a listening as an example. When you get at the organizational level, the question of understanding motivational outlooks is going to have to come in to how do we use it? Right now,
the policies, the
that's
process.
It. You
right?
got it. That's
for
where I was
implementing it to create the environment as opposed
Bingo.
to one-to-one.
Bingo.
You're looking at actually helping an individual shift their motivational outlook.
That's it. That's where I was going with it. And so I'm not trying to belittle the significance of motivational outlooks because those are, or the idea of motivational, but it does, right now we're running in a carrot and stick mentality in most organizations, and that is just, it's dysfunctional to the real sense of passion you want people to maintain about what they're doing at work.
Yeah. I just my mind's going all over like Mojo Moments. What we're doing right now is we're helping them with their training and getting that out into the world, which gets away from the carrot and stick. You talk about mastering your motivation is more of a self-context. Mastering your motivation with others, in my mind, it's almost a one-to-one. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Could be. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we've explored the other contexts.
Well, it's interesting. They're preparing to be able to help organizations look at the systemic culture that supports or doesn't support optimal motivational states.
Right.
And that's exciting. It's also really important, but it's broken into, well, what are some of the things that people look at in their organization, in their culture that depresses them, or that doesn't emphasize true vitality.
But I would argue, the content right now with Mojo Moments is more focused in the one-to-one context because we're looking at coaching, we're looking at training leaders or employees.
Yes,
you got it.
Whereas the stuff I'd love to do is more the consulting side of getting into the organization at the senior leadership level. That's an aspect. The one-to-one is obviously a piece because it's one of the contexts, but there's also the organizational, which is much more complicated. How do you create the policy? How do you create the culture? How do you get the leaders want to take the training to learn how to shift people's
Hence,
motivations?
I'm saying context is a place to start. by using.
So by
Or-
understanding the multiple contexts.
You got to learn the theory underlying it before you get into the context.
That's the chicken and egg. Here we are.
How can
Here
you
we go
talk
again.
about the context without knowing even a little bit about the motivational theory?
No, chicken and egg.
That's where I'm kind of saying. I don't know. I think that if we can differentiate between the theory and the micro skill, then we do the micro skills after the context, but we do the theory before. So we have one discussion about the foundation of, in this case, self-determination theory, because that's the theory that we go off of, buy into. And then we do the context. Then we talk about the micro skills, which would include shifting your motivational outlook.
In the various contexts.
Let me do
Active listening, feedback.
Let me do a listening thing and summarize. So what you're really saying is there's three divisions. We have the idea of a theoretical underpinning. We have the actual ideas of then going into the context, and then from there back down into the context in micro skills.
I would say that's a good summarization.
You like that?
In your active listening.
Okay, well.
Not paraphrasing. That was summarizing.
Yes, summarizing involves not using.
Just differentiating.
Yes,
Between
that's
So,
right.
in conclusion to that summary, do you agree?
That's right.
What? So, yeah, do you agree?
wanna
What?
do
Do you want to
context?
tell me what direction we're going? If you,
Well,
you
if
think-
I understand the summarization,
Is the next
is
podcast
to-
on motivation theory, or is the
Yeah.
next podcast on one-to-one context?
Got it. Well,
Yeah, so I mean, based on that summary, if you agree with it, then I would think we would just kind of give an overview of.
so tell me, what other thing would we talk about? Such, I'm going to call this the theory side. What other theories would we talk about?
Motivation, trust, power.
I think motivation and trust. No, motivation and power, not trust.
Not trust?
No, trust, I believe, is a byproduct of doing some of these other things. And if you look at self-determination theory, they don't argue it's a need. They argue that that's a byproduct of the needs being met.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again. Yeah.
Self-determination theorists do not use trust as a need.
Oh, it's a byproduct.
Yes, a byproduct
Got it.
of having autonomy, connectedness, and
Relatedness.
and competence.
Interesting.
Competence.
And so that there's been an
But it
argument.
is a theory.
What is?
Trust. There's theoretical underpinnings of trust.
Can you name a trust theory?
Well, you built a trust theory, or
I
a construct.
built a micro skill looking at trust, how it gets
Head, heart.
yes, head and heart, and the affect versus cognition and those kinds of things.
Yeah,
But
that's not. You don't think that's a theory?
it's
Because Covey
not.
has something similar.
Yes, he does this speed of trust. He's really selling a commercialized idea of trust being a mechanism for.
Well, in the
making
speed of
things
trust,
work.
what he calls the speed of trust is all about enhancing or speeding up
Yeah.
the
Performance.
creating trust or developing trust, which would
which
could be a
increases
skill.
performance.
Kind of like shifting motivational outlook. You could look at that as a skill. But it's a little different because it's not necessarily something. Well, it is stuff you do, I guess. But it's kind of, maybe it's very similar to motivation. You got to understand the theory behind it, and then you apply that in a way by doing certain actions that enhance.
But I think, Dre,
Trust
you're
building.
struggling with trust being a theory, right? The various
Yeah,
theories.
I know. I haven't seen any theories. Trust is a concept that people are using as an output.
Maybe we should ask ChatGPT if trust is a theory.
If there is, I haven't seen it.
So going back, I think we agree motivation and then power would be a good.
Those are two areas of consideration.
So we go motivation, we go power, then we go context, then we go micro skills. Is trust a micro? What is trust then?
Well, trust is a state that's created where somebody is willing to be vulnerable to the promises of someone else.
A state like affect is a state?
That's one of the dimensions of a state, but a state is a frame of mind. It's a propensity to do something, or it's a So
Got it. Like a mood?
yes, like a mood. The only difference between a mood and emotion is a mood has no object. You just feel blue.
it, yeah.
You feel blue, but you don't know why. But I'm angry at and anger,
There's
by the way,
yeah.
has a cognition to it that people don't understand. You come to the conclusion that I am really angry at that person because they did X.
That's a short right there.
Yeah.
That's a what?
We'll
It's a
see.
YouTube short.
Well, we have this.
What's the short?
It's basically a
60-second or less video that you post on YouTube.
it's like a preview to
Nah.
what's in it's a preview to what's in
That
the
was
podcast.
gold right there, Dre.
That
Yeah,
was-
let's see if the AI picks up on it.
Sorry, oh
The
boy.
whole emotion versus
The difference between mood.
Well, that's a great distinction. I think it's an important one to make. So I mean, yeah,
so trust.
Trust
state.
is state of the willingness, the psychological willingness. And notice I didn't say affective, but it is affect as well as cognition. The willingness to be vulnerable to the promises of another.
that in my mind is another podcast series. We
It
can
is.
definitely bring that one into. We'll
Trust
find a
is
spot for it.
important. It's what
But
I'm
before or after content.
Well, let's get there first. But I mean, I really love the work because you've shared the work with us, and I love it. I think it's better than the speed of trust. Just the fact the way you break everything up, and you make it simple to head and heart, and we kind of go into. I that's something we would definitely.
Oh,
love
yeah,
to
I
bring
love-
to us.
We also have a product for that, which we're going to hopefully sell at
Yes,
some
that's
point.
right. That's right.
Because I think just like motivation, that's a huge one to help people better understand how to build relationships, psychological safety. Ooh, what's psychological safety?
It's really a product or a characteristic of trust in the environment. It's psychological safety. It's to what extent it's connected to the word trust, but I think it's more a cultural phenomenon. I would use it more in relation to being at the organizational.
But there are theories behind that. I guess there's theories behind most of this
Theories
stuff and how
behind what?
behind these topics of how it works.
I
right?
think there's theories like SDT and reinforcement theories. Those are examples of really packed, well investigated empirical places. Trust is still it's what people are looking for in organizations.
That's a great point because we work in the defense industry, and I know the Navy has put out this whole Get Real, Get Better program of better way of doing business by exposing yourself and being honest with some of your.
The CNO is going to watch our podcast.
Yeah, and then they're going to know that what they're missing in that whole Get Real, Get Better is this aspect of trust and how, because it tells you what they want you to do, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. And a big element, I know.
So it's a usable framework, but it needs to come with application.
Yes, and so
Skill.
so the whole trust aspect is, in order for someone to do what they're asking you to do, you have to trust the organization that they're not going to get fried or get in trouble for being late on a project. And they're missing that. They're missing the application of trust. And so that's huge. I think it's something that's needed. And so I mean, maybe the CNO, now that she's been confirmed, can watch this and hire us to help her out. So, so I guess this is good.
So are we a consensus that we're going to talk about
Motivation
theory?
Yeah.
Then power.
Yep.
Then power.
Then one-to-one.
No, we could go to the context of how those two ideas might interface with the third application opportunity or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. This is a good conversation, and we appreciate everyone joining us for it. we were actually talking about this off camera. We're like, let's stop the conversation. Let's get it on camera. And this is a very
Dude, we learned about emotions. We got a demonstration of active listening, summarizing.
Oh my goodness!
And I'll bet we got 8 shorts out of that.
This guy's the short monster.
I'm into shorts now. Because you just put in this AI thing, boom.
Well,
You got these shorts, and then people can watch short videos and learn little tidbits.
You know what? Little tidbits that would be really fun is to look at the idea of why is the environment so important to look at? Because context is what I'm talking about. Why is it important to look at that?
Well, you know whether you need a jacket Because it's cold in here. I think my cameras are getting cold. I might have to turn the fan off.
Well, speaking of shorts, I think you're wearing shorts here. You're very cold, right?
That's true. But I'd rather that than the cameras overheat. So keep going.
Let me go just a little bit here. What is missing is an understanding of what it's like to understand the psychic process. Why is it? Why can't we be better at educating ourselves or others, or when we're working one-on-one or through teams and so forth, to help people understand how decisions are made inwardly, and what is it that people are constantly doing? The appraisal process, which is something we've written both of us have, all three of us have written with that lag study that we did, the causal study that we just finished. That underlying idea that somebody is constantly monitoring both physiologically what the environment is giving them, whether it's the lighting or it's the heating or the whatever, and often bypassing the psychic understanding of what that means to them. If we argue that people are constantly filtering, both consciously and unconsciously, what they're getting from the environment, and processing that without any acknowledgement of it, they often lose the impact that power may have, or motivational strategies might have, or it might even be what people's ability to change their own habits to be more functional, And so somewhere along the line, it would be fun to just talk a little bit about why is the understanding of self, psychic skills, psychological, because most people are psychologically incompetent in some ways. They don't understand some of the things that figure into their decisions to do certain things, whether it's moral decision making, or just simple comfort. For example, is in any way do you speak up and say, do you tell your truth to power? Yikes! In organizations, it's awful. People don't want to say their truth, that would help everybody else be more effective.
That's getting into psychological safety, whether or not you have that.
Whether the organization, whether the.
So we're going to talk about that next, or motivation?
No, let's
motivation.
I think motivation is the way we should go.
So Jimmy's going to say we need a joke before we finish.
Trey, real quick, we need a joke. Not the McGregor joke. We can't tell that one.
Not the McGregor joke.
Oh, man, now they want to hear it, though. We'll put it in the comments.
Sure.
No. The McGregor?
No, not the actual joke. Okay. Maybe a link to it or something.
Oh, my goodness. No, we couldn't do that. I can't think of have you got one? Either of you guys got one?
I was watching Norm Macdonald on Conan old YouTube videos yesterday, so I have one that he told.
Not the moth joke, is it?
No, it's not the moth joke, although I really love that joke. And it's not dirty. That's not a dirty joke. So we could tell. Well, if you do it the way he did it,
it's such a good joke. Minutes. We could do it quickly.
Yeah.
What do you have? You have another one in mind? Though?
So the one that he said was, he was talking about his new neighbor. It was his neighbor who had just moved to the country, and he was in the city, living next door to Norm before that. And his neighbor was telling him about how he had just, met his neighbor over there, which, like New York, people just kind of do their own thing. He's in their first day. His neighbors are over there talking to him. He's in, on this farm and whatever. And this guy comes over. Hey, I want to invite you over to this gathering we're having. In addition to just welcoming you to the neighborhood, it'd be great to have you over tomorrow night to celebrate I forget what the holiday was, but there was some holiday celebrating. He's like, oh my God, that sounds great. I'd love to join you. What kind of party are we talking about? And the neighbor says, well, admittedly, there's a little bit of drinking, a little bit of fighting, maybe a little bit of fornicating. And the guy says, oh my gosh, all right, well, what time should I be there? And the neighbor says, oh, it really doesn't matter. It's just going to be the two of us. No, is that good?
That's good.
That's not. All right, very good. Yeah, thank you, Norm Macdonald. Congrats! You made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We genuinely hope that you found value in our conversation. If you liked it, please click that like button below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on our current episodes. And if you didn't like it, you can click the dislike button, but make sure you click it twice. We're eager to hear from you, whether it's your thoughts, questions, topic ideas, or if you're interested in our leadership training and consulting support. Leave us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. We're open to any and all feedback. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back for more insightful leadership discussion. Until next time.